it's always hard to say this, but we have a link in mind. And he was a 8-month-old little boy. And I remember just bursting out crying, thinking, oh my goodness.
Hello, my name's Rob, and I'm married to Richard, and we have 2 adopted children, and we're both teachers. So our children are now, our son is 6 years old, and he's been with us for about 4 years, and our daughter is nearly 3, and she's been with us for just over 2 years.
I'm Abby. I live on the border of South Wales. I'm a single adopter. My little boy has been with me for just over 12 months now. He's 2 years old, so life's very busy.
Yeah, Clare and Gareth, we've adopted 3 siblings.
Yeah, we're 6 years in now.
6 years in, and they're now 10, 9 and 7. And we're still super busy with it all. But unlike your 2, they all seem to hate each other, basically.
Hi, I'm Mo, and together with my wife, we adopted our now 2.5-year-old daughter. We first adopted her on her first birthday when we first saw her for the first time, and brought her home months later.
How am I going to have a child as a single gay woman? So I went through fertility treatment first, and on my 3rd round of IVF, I remember seeing the embryo on the screen and thinking, this is just science. Like, you know, there's no, I don't need to be pregnant. Right. And I remember driving home and my mum had come with me, and I said, oh my God, I could be pregnant right now. And my mum said, we should have thought about that before we went through all this. I just felt fear. I didn't feel excited as such. And then when the 3rd round failed, I thought, no way, this is not what I want.
Right.
And now I look back and I think, well, I had to go through all that for the timings to work, you know, to be in the right place at the right time, to be matched with my little boys. But yeah, the process, the assessment, the training was great. And I think after going through fertility treatment and feeling so isolated, so just lonely, I think in my mind, I thought, would the adoption process feel the same? And I couldn't have been any more wrong. I've felt so supported, and my assessing social worker, she'd became like my best friend. She knew more about me than I think anybody else ever had. So yeah, I had a brilliant journey to get matched. And then I remember the first time I was meeting my family finder, and I had loads of questions in my head. I thought, you know, how long do people wait? Like, did they have, what happens now? Did they have a child in mind? And 10 minutes into the meeting, I asked, is today the first day that you start looking for a match? And she said, oh, it's always hard to say this, but we have a link in mind. And he was a 8-month-old little boy. And I remember just bursting out crying, thinking, oh my goodness. Yeah, and they told me a little bit about him and said, it was on a Friday, and they said, do you want the weekend to kind of digest this information? And I said, no, I want you to tell me everything, you know. So they sent me his report, and I'd said, can you send me his photograph separately? I'd promised myself I'd read the report before I looked at a photo, and I was reading the report thinking, I think you prepare yourself as you're going along through the process that, you know, this child, he may have additional needs, he may have been through so much because of what you learn in the training. Yeah, I knew from reading that, I thought, that's my boy. And then I remember I was going to click on the photograph, and it took me about an hour to be brave enough to click on it. And I did. I opened it, and he just looked the spitting image of me.
Really?
And I thought, oh my goodness. And it was fate. Even his little personality, you know, is just like me. And I think we were made to be together. So yeah, it's beautiful. I've had a lovely journey. So
it's funny you say, he's a spitting image of you, because when we mention about being adopted, people just go, oh my God, I had no idea. Oh my God, but they look so much like you two. And it's really, I mean, they do take on your mannerisms and your personality, but also in terms of looks as well,
Yeah.
That's bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah, 'cause all three are completely different to each other as well, aren't they?
We're both Bengali, and ideally, like, it wasn't one of our major stipulations, but ideally we wanted someone who looked sort of like us, of Asian heritage, purely for the aspect of religion and family, and just looks like a lot like us. So for us, we wanted to have maybe quite a young child, but basically almost like a newborn of Asian heritage. So initially, when we mentioned that to our social worker, she was like, well, in this region, it's quite rare to get that young and also of Asian heritage, which I found quite strange, because obviously there's a lot of Asians in where we live, in our area, in Wales as well. So there must be kids out there who do need support and and help. So I was a bit surprised as to why there was such little out there available. But yeah, for us, it was mainly to try and have someone who sort of looked like our family and looked like us. So and I think that would have made it easier for the child growing up.
We had a similar experience that our son's social worker, the family finder, had clicked on our profile on Linkmaker because of resemblance to my husband, and pictures of them both at that age are very, very similar. So I think they do look for things like that.
Yeah, they probably do, because I think one of the other things that we noticed was the height of the birth parents. It's the same as us.
Okay.
Yeah. Although we do think our boy is going to be quite tall, and he's as tall as me now at 10, so I'm not sure about that. But yeah, I suppose they do take that into consideration, don't they?
It's lovely though, because when we're out and about and people have said to him, don't you look like your mum? And inside it's like someone's just turned the light on or something, because it's just lovely.
It was absolutely love at first sight. We fell for him just from one photo. Which I suppose shows the danger of sometimes looking at photos, that you really need to know the story behind that child. And we started fighting for him from that very day. Having never met that child, we just naturally became advocates for him. So as the process seemed to take forever, and we look back now, and actually it was quite quick. I think that link was made at Christmas, and he was living with us by April. So it wasn't too long. But it feels a long time when you're going to work each day and wondering whether you're going to get a phone call. And
your child, because you think of them as your child, what's my child doing today? We thought that over Christmas. Our child is having Christmas somewhere. It's a really weird feeling, isn't it?
He was also outside of the age range that we had set, and he was that little bit older, and naively at the time I think we thought, what are we missing out on? And actually that wasn't the right way of looking at it, because there are lots and lots of firsts in children's lives, and even if you do take an older child, there are plenty of first experiences, and so we didn't need to worry. It was absolutely the perfect match.
The first day that my son moved in, I had not expectations, but you have this idea of what it will be like, and I thought it'll be wonderful. We'd had 2 weeks of introductions, and it was probably the hardest day of mine and his life. Because he missed his foster carers, and he'd never stayed anywhere else. And I mean, he was fine in the day. I picked him up really early in the morning, and we had a lovely day. And it came to about 5 o'clock in the evening. I thought, right, we'll do tea, we'll bath and wind down. And he was just in the worst state ever, screaming, and I thought, let's have a bath, will that calm him down? Nothing calmed him down. And I thought, what do I do? I'm on my own, because you're advised for no one else to come in the house in the early days, and I'd never had a baby before. It was the scariest thing, without him being like that anyway. And I remember phoning my cousin, and she said, just take him for a walk around the block. and I was soaked because he'd been in the bath and he was having a paddy and he'd got me wet, and he was just in his pajamas. Luckily it was sunny, and we were just walking around the block, and I was crying and he was crying, and I thought, and I felt guilty. I felt like I'd taken him away from a family that loved him and he loved as well. And I actually rang the foster carers saying, I feel cruel. And as hard as it must have been for them, they were like, Abby, you're not cruel. What you're doing, this is just a process. Like, he doesn't understand what's going on. This is his trauma. And I had to understand that. And it took till about 10 p.m. that night of him crying that he eventually just fell asleep on me on the sofa. And then we woke up the following day and I thought, let's try again. And it kind of went on like that for probably the first couple of weeks. And that was kind of a misconception I had, that if a child's so young, maybe they won't know. But he did. He was finding it hard, and it was sad, but we've got through it, and now a year on, it's like he's never been anywhere else. So.